News Radio 840 WHAS. Coming up on today's Louisville Real Estate Show, can you see the history of flooding in the area you're going to possibly buy a home? We'll find out. Also, should a home inspector be required to walk on and examine a roof they're inspecting even after a snowstorm? And is your home harboring a deadly secret? That musty smell? It could be toxic mold. Hi, everybody. Bob Sokoler, owner of the Sokoler team at RE/MAX Properties East. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday. Hope you're having a good one to kick it off, and hopefully we'll keep you entertained at least till the top of the hour and staying with us for this half hour. We've got Cora Henderson, who is one of the head honchos at Pitt & Frank Attorneys, LLC. If you're thinking about getting your home closed that you're potentially buying, or even will or anything else that's legal related, Cora either knows or can get you in contact with the people who do. You can reach Cora and her team at 895-9900. Also here, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service. Now, I am so proud to tell you, the #1 home team inspection service in the country, 10 years in a row. He also owns Team Bug Out to get rid of pests, bugs and the like. If you'd like to get a hold of Brad and his team, 844-411-TEAM. And if you are thinking of selling your home now or in the future, I would love to be able to help you. I'll come out, just call me, and it's free, no obligation. We'll talk about the process. I'm doing that a lot these days. People who are just interested in what happens when you're ready to sell. It may be that you're not at the moment, but you want to know what the home is worth, what needs to be done or not. And that's where my expertise of 20 plus years come into play. You can reach me at 376-5483. That's 376-LIVE. Or you can go to bobsellslouisville.com. Or if you'd like a free instant analysis, it's a computer, it's a start. Not necessarily as accurate as I would be if I was there, but you can go to WeSellLouisville.com and click on the top of the page. All right. Let's start it off with a legal question for Cora Henderson over at Pitt & Frank LLC. Steve is writing in. I'm looking at a house tomorrow, Monday, that is in a flood zone and requires flood insurance. And Cora, he's asking in this email, is there any way to see the history of flooding for a house or a neighborhood? He says, I have no clue if it has to be disclosed or not by a seller or buyer agent or by the seller. Cora.
Happy to help with that, Steve. And that's a great question and a legitimate concern. I think it's always important to do research on the home before you buy it. So regarding the frequency of any flooding, certainly the seller should disclose that information. So whether or not that's already been disclosed on the standard seller's disclosure, you can always have yourself or your agent make that request to have more history or understanding on what the seller's experience has been regarding the flooding of the property. It may be likely, it may be unlikely. Also, there are certain third-party resources and websites that you can look at and to see whether or not it's a rare kind of a rare determination or maybe a newer determination that it's in the flood zone. You know, MSD will frequently kind of redo some of those flood zone areas. And, you know, some of them seem obvious. Yeah, the home abuts the Ohio River. Okay, I'm guessing that the flood opportunities are dependent upon, you know, the levels of the Ohio River. And then some of it may be a little bit harder to determine. Maybe there's a creek and maybe it's not close at all to the property, but given the right rainstorms or flooding, it could give rise and flood into your property, which makes it therefore in the flood zone. So really, I think not only the frequency, but getting an understanding of what body of water or what circumstances makes it be in the flood zone. Is it the topo levels? Like, is it something where it's just really down in a valley and makes itself so ripe for flooding? Also, you can engage a surveyor and they may be able to have certain knowledge to even get you out of that flood zone determination, at least for requirements of flood insurance for financing. We can have what's called a seeking of a LOMA letter after an elevation certificate is obtained. That way you can determine again whether or not the home is up on a hill that it would be somewhat free from those flooding opportunities. So there's a number of different ways that you can do research, all of which are important. And remember, when you think about flood insurance, and this is important, when you're a cash buyer, of course, that's your decision whether or not you want to have flood insurance, just like homeowners insurance. It's probably a good idea, particularly if you are more in more of a threatened position to experience those flooding or other disasters. But if you're in a financed transaction, that lender will require you to have flood insurance. And that is to protect their interest in the property. Because if it were to be damaged by a flood, then suddenly the collateral they've used to loan the money isn't as valuable as it was before. For the same premise is why they require homeowners insurance. So again, depending on how you're purchasing the property, you may or may not be required to even purchase flood insurance. Lastly, flood insurance is a government program, so that's important to understand too.
And we should point out that an inspection from, say, Home Team Inspection could determine if flooding in that area and that home has and could be a problem in the future, right? On that, Brad?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know about future, but certainly we would have record, we would be able to pick up, any damage, any watermarks from past flooding.
Okay. And that's what you want to know, what the history has been. I guess you're right. You can't tell future, but you can at least see what the past has been.
Right.
While we're with you on this, Brad, at Home Team Inspection, let's talk about Newman. Has had his home inspected during a small snowstorm that we had a week or two ago. And the inspector refused to walk on the roof, saying it wasn't safe. Instead, he used binoculars to look for problems. And I know a lot of inspectors can even use a drone. The question from Newman is, can the inspector really see hail damage, chimney problems, and conditions of shingles and flashing from the ground? Thoughts?
Yeah. So Newman, it's a great question. It comes up every season like this, rainy days, snowy days. Bob, I'm going to go back. I really appreciate the partnership that we have with your agents, with the clients, with the radio listeners. Hitting the 10 year in a row as the National Team of the Year out of almost 200 different territories is pretty remarkable. And one of the things that I deal with is I've got counterparts in like Anchorage, Alaska. I mean, they don't see a roof, 9 or 10 months out of the year. So remember that a roof has two sides to it. And right now, with the heavy snow that we've had here, the snow is staying on the roof, the ice is staying on the roof for much longer periods of time than it normally would. A home inspector, according to our standards of practice, never, ever, ever has to walk a roof. It's not a requirement. We are required to report what we can see and how we viewed the roof. So Home Team's best practice is we walk every roof that we can safely walk. Right now, you can't walk on a roof. So we are looking at roofs with ladders. We are looking at roofs from the ground using a specialized tool called an eye stick. We're doing everything that we can to look to see what the condition of the roof is. But right now, we can't see shingles. So no, you're not going to be able to see hail damage. You're not going to be able to see flashings around those plumbing vents, around a chimney in many houses. What I will say to you is we always attempt to work with our buyers or sellers, anybody that we're doing the inspection for. We want to give them the best view possible, but sometimes we do have to go back and take a look. Sometimes we do have to work those things in. But just keep in mind that we know what a condition of the underside of the roof is because we're going up into the attics. We're looking for those water leaks. We're looking for those ice dams. Right now, we've got a lot of water pouring into houses that people have never seen before because the gutters have frozen solid and the ice has worked its way back up under the sheathing. And suddenly people are getting water stains in the house going, what's going on? Those are all things that we see. We can see whether or not a roof has been replaced, shingles have been replaced, because you've got all these additional holes up in the roof sheathing. So yeah, it is difficult, but just keep in mind, while we may not be able to report the exact conditions of the shingles, we're going to report exactly what we are able to see from whatever vantage point it is. And fortunately, unlike Anchorage, Alaska, that it's not going to thaw out for another 6 months, we may have the opportunity to see that roof again before you go to closing. But short of that, if you get to the point of closing, everything's dry inside, then make friends with the roofer and have them come out in the spring and do a thorough analysis of it.
Good answer. Very thorough. I will tell you, if you'd like to re-listen and see this answer, anything you hear on this radio show, you can go to LouisvilleAnswers.com. That's LouisvilleAnswers.com. That is a redirect to our YouTube channel where the show resides in video and audio. And a reminder, if you'd like to see what the reviews are for our Sokoler team, because we'd love to be able to help you with buying or selling, we're very proud of our reviews. We've made it pretty simple for you. Go to LouisvilleZillow.com. or LouisvilleGoogle.com and read the reviews that we've got there. And by the way, coming up in just a few minutes, is your home harboring a deadly secret? The musty smell that you may be smelling, or that unusual smell, could be toxic mold. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Cora Hennison, Pitt and Frank Attorneys, Andy wrote us an email, and you can as well, folks. Send me an email, bob@wesellouisville.com, and put radio question in the subject line, and in the body of the email, just give me the question. That's what Andy did. He said, I asked my agent a simple question. What is the racial makeup of a neighborhood that we're looking in? And my agent said she could not do it. And he says, I don't understand why. From a legal standpoint, Cora, you want to take that on?
Happy to help. And so I think the agent had a correct response, because we are all bound to be careful and to be cautious regarding fair housing, whether it's in the rental of the real estate, the sale of the real estate, and a lot of other different transactions regarding the same. So fair housing can be dealt with in a number of different laws in different ways, but we at a minimum would have our federal law speak to us, and a great resource would be HUD.gov, by the way. And the federal law says there are 7 protected classes under fair housing. And if you are a member of that protected class, you could be a possible claimant in the event someone were to discriminate against you, based on one of those classes. Well, I can tell you right now, race is one of those classes. So the question was, determining the racial makeup of that. And so, again, local ordinances, Metro, I know, has one. A lot of state law may have additional protected classes. The supremacy clause wouldn't allow to take away from the 7 that they've given, but you can certainly add to that, which many have done. And again, HUD.gov is a great resource for the federal. For our state of Kentucky, the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights is fabulous. If you have any questions, if you feel like you've been discriminated against, or you have questions about fair housing, you want to run past a scenario, you want additional resources, the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights is awesome. But, I think agents particularly have to be careful, not only in engaging in any of that type of discrimination, but answering certain questions that could skirt some of those issues. You certainly don't want to play a role in that, or even the potential of discriminating against a protected class. And so really the best way to handle those situations is to look at third-party resources. So if you're asking questions, such as what is the racial makeup, or is this school a good school? Is this neighborhood safe? Is there a sex offender, that lives on the street or nearby? I think that as a consumer, you just have to be aware of your third-party resources that you can look up, whether you're, seeking out certain statistics. If you want to research a school or an area or a crime rates, you can look on the Kentucky State Police website, things of that nature. So I think engaging in that type of research so that you're steering your own conclusions, as opposed to your real estate professional steering those decisions or controlling those decisions for you. They never want to be a part of it. Certainly they don't want to be a part of any discrimination. And if someone, were to engage in that, I'm sure any good agent would be good to dissolve that relationship and move forward, because there's just zero tolerance for that. So hopefully that helps a little bit in a nutshell about fair housing, but that's a law we take very seriously, as does the National Association of Realtors. There's a lot of education that's required amongst the real estate community for fair housing, and we're proud of that.
Right. And I should point out, if there are any questions that you have that pertain to race or problems in the community, Google it. These days, there's plenty of information online, as Cora alluded to. I would just go to Google, just do some research, and it'll pop up there. And we are always watching what we say, because we are being monitored. And we always believe someone that could be calling could be from the government, just checking up to make sure we're following correct protocol, just so you know. When we come back, we're going to talk about a smell that may be in your home, and maybe you haven't even noticed it, but it could be a deadly toxic mold. Continuing with us after the break, Cora Henderson, who's one of the big shots and head honchos over at Pitt and Frank LLC. They do a great job of getting your loan closed, as well as other legal items. You can reach Cora and her folks at 895-9900. And if you are going to buy a home or thinking about selling your home, you may want a pre-inspection. And that's where Home Team Inspection Service comes into play. They come in as a team. If you are buying a home, you can pick the inspector you want, and Home Team is a great group to think about using. 844-411-TEAM. You can also hire them for team bug out if you've got some bugs crawling around, even mice crawling around the house. And if you're thinking of selling your home now or in the future, I would love to be able to at least talk to you and tell you what the options are. And it may not be for a couple of years, but you may want to know, what is the home worth right now? What would you have to do if you wanted to sell it? I believe there's a lot of pent-up buyer and seller activity. We're waiting for possibly interest rates to drop. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow when the new administration is sworn in. We just don't know what's going to happen with the economy. But you should be ready, even if it's not going to happen in the next month or so. You give me a call at 376-5483 or 376-LIVE. Or you can fill out a form, bobsellslouisville.com, and I will hit submit, and I'll head out to you and talk, again, free, no obligation. And for instant analysis, computerized, you can go to wesellouisville.com and click on the top of the page. We're back in a moment on News Radio 840 WHAS. News Radio 840 WHAS, Bob Sokoler, the Louisville Real Estate Show. And we're here with you till the top of the hour. A reminder, staying with us, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service and Team Bug Out. You can reach Brad and his folks at 844-411-TEAM. If you're thinking about selling your home, I would love to be able to help you. You can reach me on my cell phone, 376-5483, or bobsellslouisville.com. And also staying with us, Cora Henderson, who is one of the big wigs over at Pitt and Frank Attorneys, LLC. If you are buying and you'd like to find a place to close the loan, which is what a mortgage company will ask you to do if you're going to get a mortgage, or even if you're paying cash, Pitt and Frank is a great group. A lot of folks know them and trust them. You can reach Cora at 895-9900. Thanks to Barbara Corcoran, who did that commercial for us a couple of minutes ago. She's a friend and a confidant and a mentor, and we appreciate her. You see her on Shark Tank, and she's a really good source of information for us. Thank you, Barbara. All right, so maybe you've been smelling something a little unusual. It could be mold. And Brad, I'm going to bring you in on this. Let's start with identifying what mold and what it smells like, but even though there are different types of smells. Brad?
All right. So I got to be honest with you. I rarely ever smell mold. I just don't. I mean, we do about 200 mold investigations a year at Home Team, and it's not common for me to walk in and smell anything. Now, I'm just not wired that way. Some of my other team members are. I talk to a lot of homeowners that can smell that mold. So it's not always a smell that you pick up. Sometimes, you'll identify it by maybe a tingling feeling in your nose or the back of your palate. Sometimes it hits you there. So if you have mold in the house, you're not necessarily going to smell it. Sometimes those musty smells that you pick up, sometimes just old textiles, old leather, people get kind of confused by that. But I think that where you're going with this, Bob, is that those molds that are in our house, and we were talking, before the show began, a lot of these ice dams that are building up in people's homes are now suddenly creating a lot of wet areas in their house, which very well may cause mold to start growing. Because once mold gets, you can't really do anything about the spores that are already in the house. You can't do anything about the surfaces that the mold lives on. But as long as they stay dry, the mold won't grow. Once they're activated by water and a lot of this moisture that's coming in because of these ice dams, that's going to trigger a lot of mold growing throughout areas that people are not typically seeing them in their homes.
So we should also point out there are different types of mold.
Yes.
Some can cause allergies or react to your allergies. Some affect those with a chronic condition or weakened immune system. And then there are some that are toxic to all of us, regardless of our health issues.
Yeah, and I think the toxic, and I want to be careful about using terms like deadly and toxic, because a lot of those reactions that people have, everyone responds to mold in a unique way. So, if you're allergic to it, even a small amount of alternaria can set you into a severe, asthmatic kind of reaction. There are people that have built up mold sensitivities and mold toxicities to the different environments they've lived in, and even a small amount of the toxin will set them off. You and I, Cora, we may have, good immune systems, and those toxins aren't going to affect us at all. Just like when we're walking around outside and we're hit with a pollen or another mold spore out there, that it doesn't trigger anything. But some people are triggered, and it hits their respiratory and it hits their immune systems very heavily. But everyone is unique in the way that mold affects them. So even though it's a quote unquote toxic mold, the black mold, the Stachybotrys, some people, it doesn't really even bother them. But it's not something you want to live with either.
Right. So you want to take action to remediate it. And if you want, give me a call up. We've got people who we can send you to talk about it. But just in case you're wondering, a mold can be musty, stale, damp scent, even though Brad can't smell it. I can. That's an early stage of mold. Or black mold, earthy, rotting leaves smell. That could be possible. And other molds can range from a smell of decaying meat to sweaty socks. They vary by types, growth, and conditions. So those are some of the things that we've talked about and have seen with mold, and there's nothing to fool around with. If you need somebody to help you, give me a call. We'll get you some information and more people to talk to at 376-5483. All right, we go back to our questions. This is for Cora Henderson over in Pitt and Frank. Bobby says, before buying a home, he asked about night trains on tracks near the house. He was going to buy the house. Bobby says his agent said he couldn't find anything to get the information about whether there are trains on the tracks that are nearby. He said he tried. Sure enough, there are trains going by at night, Bobby says, but thankfully not that often. So Bobby is wondering, Cora and Brad, is there any way to get a train schedule? Should his agent have been able to get that information? Let's start with you, Cora, and I did some research on this question as well. Go ahead.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to your input on that. That certainly hasn't come up. And, I think maybe in other cities, I could see how that could be an issue. Or maybe even, in the Bardstown area where you have those tracks there. If anybody's ever done the dinner train, it's quite lovely there through Bardstown. But, you definitely back up to a lot of residential homes there whenever you're going along the train tracks. So, I don't know about a resource and check-in train times and that kind of, item, which I think Bob can opine on. But, for me, I would go to the seller. I mean, they're the ones that have lived there. Whether it was investment property, there had to be a tenant. Somebody has boots on the ground experience that to me would be probably more worthwhile than a schedule I Googled. And so I'd really like to know the frequency and the sounds and what it's like. Also, I always encourage people, if they want to know when they're buying a property, what it's like to live there, visit the property. It certainly doesn't mean that you have to, don't want you to trespass or enter the property without an appointment, but you can drive by, get a good sense, different times of the day. Can you picture yourself going home for lunch? Or what is it like in your evening commute? Or, what is it like if you want to go for a walk, before bedtime or whatever that looks like? If you're going to be living there, drive by the area. There's nothing wrong with that. And in doing that, you may be able to see or not see, any trains kind of going by. Of course, if you don't go by at 3:00 in the morning, you may not hit that type of schedule, but I think it could give you a good sense. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and I think you combine a couple of things you said. First, find out from the seller through your agent if there are trains at night, and if so, what approximate time. And then you might just want to set your alarm, get up and go over there and just sit in the area and just see what it sounds like.
Sure, yeah.
And I would also suggest you do that anyway, in terms of just going over there, and if you're going to buy a house, see what the area is like for traffic reasons, for pedestrian, and of course not during a snowstorm or when we have ice out there, but just see what type of the community it is when you would be living there. And then finally, I did the research, and it is very difficult to find train schedules. I found the companies that do in fact run on the tracks, but they don't necessarily publish a schedule. And I wonder if that's intentional, so that you can't track them, or if it's delays, they can't be held to a standard of when the train's coming through. But as I saw, it was very difficult to find any sort of a semblance of a train schedule. So I think your agent, Bobby, in this case, did his due diligence as much as he possibly
And also,
could.
Bobby, I think, just being aware that, there is a doctrine out there called coming to the nuisance. And so I think you'd be hard pressed to make an argument, I don't know the legs to it, if you complained after you bought it that, oh, this is too loud, or I can't deal with this is a nuisance, and you try to get a lawsuit, together in that regard because you knew it was there. So that's your opportunity to do the due diligence, whether, there's an airport in your backyard, whether there's, you abut a slaughterhouse and you're worried about the noxious odors or smells, or, in this instance, you have the railroad track. There could be a number of different types of definable nuisances, and you want to make sure your due diligence is done so that would be acceptable for you before you buy the home.
Brad, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, Bob, is periodically people ask us about windows and insulation, sound deadening. Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting is that they'll often say to us, well, we asked the seller about noise, whether it's highway noise, whether it's train noise, and they're like, yeah, we don't hear anything. I think sometimes people get accustomed to the sound around them, where they become kind of noise blind, if you will, where they don't even hear it, just because it just is part of the natural ebb and flow of the day. Yeah. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. And it's actually comforting. In some cases, people tell me who they back up to a highway, they don't even notice the highway. Now, I'd have a tough time buying into that, but they say we don't even notice it. Mm-hmm. All right, Bobby, hopefully that helps you. One final question here. Brad Lawler, Home Team Inspection. Brenda sent us this email. She hired a company to build a deck. They dug holes. They put in 6x6 posts, poured in dry concrete mix, no water, and they said the rain would harden it. but the wood will just sit in a hole with water and then the concrete. And Brenda's saying that can't be good. Is that the way to do it?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. We see that a lot. Hopefully, they've used pressure treated lumber. The biggest problem that we have is not the concrete in contact with the wood, it's dirt in contact with the wood. So, as long as it's pressure treated, it's not an uncommon building technique to just, people install mailboxes like that all the time. So, I don't know that it's a specific issue, but it is a common practice.
Yeah, and then would be sitting on some sort of metal plate that defines the drop between that and the concrete below it?
Well, I mean, not. Yeah, it can be built that way where it's actually a metal plate in contact with concrete, but the concrete's above ground. That's not. You don't see that very often in the Louisville area. I'll just say that.
A reminder, you can see a replay of this show by going to LouisvilleAnswers.com. It'll be waiting for you, video and audio. It's a redirect to our YouTube channel. If you go to LouisvilleQuestions.com, that's where we're compiling individual questions from the radio show. So we're compiling quite a bit of information there. And then if you want to see what the sellers are saying about us, at the closing table, I have done interviews and probably will be doing again as we get into 2025. You can go to LouisvilleSellersTalk.com. We are out of time. My thanks to Cora Henderson over at Pitt and Frank Attorneys, LLC. They do a great job of getting your loan closed, as well as other things like legal wills, anything legal related. You can reach Cora and the folks over there at 895-9900. Also, Brad Lawler, congratulations again. 10 years in a row, the number one home team inspection service in the country. That's a great honor. And also, Brad owns a team bug out. You can reach Brad for an inspection or for termite service or bug service. 844-411-TEAM is his number. And if you're thinking of selling now or in the future and you got a question, well, what would I need to do to get it on the market? What was the home worth? What's the staging that should be done to get us the top dollar? That's what my job is. I'm doing it more than 20 years now. You can give me a call anytime. Come out free, no obligation, no home too big, no home too small. We work both in Southern Indiana and Louisville and surrounding areas. 376-5483 is my direct cell number. That's 376-LIVE. Or go to bobsellslouisville.com and fill out the form. And for free computer analysis, all you do is go to WeSellLouisville.com on your phone or on your computer, and at the top of the page, click on it, fill it out, and you'll get an instant analysis. It's computerized, but it's a start. Again, we're out of time. We'll see you next Sunday on News Radio 840 WHAS.